The other day our president was celebrating Tanzania overtaking us. But the thing is this, Tanzania has not overtaken us. There are two ways. There are two systems that govern the natural world. It is called growth and decay. The exact movement. Now, what has happened is that Tanzania has not done anything remarkable, but Kenya has decayed. And that's why Tanzania is looking like it's overtaken Kenya. Kenya has decayed, and the decay began under Uhuru Kenyatta. It is maturing under William Ruto. So, we need some surgery to get rid of the dead flesh, before we amputate the leg. Yes.
The Super Senator of Busia, Okiyah Omtatah, has come out to really condemn President William Ruto administration, citing that the other day he was spotted celebrating that Tanzania has overtaken Kenya. However, according to Okiyah Omtatah, what has really happened is that Kenya has decayed, and that's why Tanzania is appearing like it's growing. So it's the rule of natural forces. Kenya started decaying under the rule of President Uhuru Kenyatta while Ruto was the deputy president. And now this decay has come to mature in the current administration. And thus, many investors have left the decaying nation for other nations which seems better, and that is Tanzania. We have seen people like Jimmy Wanjigi come out and say this.
When you start seeing a government struggling with paying salaries, Eric, as you mentioned, you've seen some of the government's people on television talking about the balance between debt and salaries. What are the priorities? We are teetering on what is called debt default. And I think Kenyans need to understand what that means to our lives. Ghana recently, December, went through a modicum of debt default. They could not meet their debt obligations. So what did Ghana do? They went to the IMF. And the IMF told them, before we look at you dealing with your debts, the sovereign in your country must understand and feel the pain first. Yes, CT. So Ghana calls in their bonds and says, now, if you have a bond of 10,000 shillings, you now take it at a discounted rate of 30%. So it shelves off
people who had lent it domestically.
Yes,
basically
it shelves off 3,000 shillings and says 7,000 is yours. Now this 3,000, come back for it in 3 years. The next 3 years is 0% interest, but in 3 years you come, we give you 3%. But it didn't stop there. They went to bank accounts because the threat of banks collapsing is huge. So they come to your bank account. They raid your current account. They do the same thing. Here they will raid your M-Pesa and do the same thing.
What is raiding and doing the same thing? What does that mean?
It means that if you have a deposit in your M-Pesa of 10,000 shillings, they will take 30%. And you then have 7,000. So your balance, if you have a current account,
your balance suddenly becomes 7,000.
Becomes 7,000. Who is the sovereign?
It's you, the citizen.
How do you starve off a bank collapse?
You detain the cash.
You detain the cash. And that is coming to this country. That is our best case scenario.
That is our best
case scenario.
Right, I'm waiting for
But what has it happened? What has happened to Ghana in 4 months? You've had an inflation rate that went from 12% to 45%.
Yeah.
So even whatever money you have left has become half its value on the market.
Right.
All right?
Its purchasing power.
The 7,000 that was left on M-Pesa is now worth 3,000.
3,000.
Yes.
This is where we are headed. And that is our best case scenario. If you see Greece, if you remember the issue of Greece, they closed the banks.
Literally.
literally for
With
4
people's
years.
deposit.
Your money was locked up.
Yeah.
Lebanon, they are still closed. And the currency has lost 90% of its value. Lebanon is still closed from 2019. Banks are closed. You're told, we'll give you a little stipend every month for you to try and exist, of money that is yours in your bank account. So our best case scenario is the Ghanaian situation. This is a reality to our lives going forward. And what are the implications of this? The implications mean that you cannot have the life that we are living today. However much we are struggling, this struggle will pale in comparison to what is coming. What does it mean in terms of jobs, confidence, salaries, and so on and so forth? This is where we are headed. And this is what we were trying to articulate last year when we did this audit. This audit was an analysis of our debt and the fact that it is going to choke us. Next year's repayments in the next financial year are also 1.4 trillion. Where is this revenue coming from? The following year, our repayments are 1.6 trillion. They keep increasing. I've seen some people say we have 2 years to recover the economy. We will not recover. As long as that burden is on us, there's nothing called recovery here. Because what are we going to do to commensurately produce the income to deal with that?
Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi comes out to say that when you see a government struggling between juggling to pay debt or salaries and many other things which should be the first priority, then it spends doom to the citizens of countries like that. He went ahead to say that indeed Kenya is falling into debt distress, and this debt distress is going to cost us in the coming days. Looking at how things are happening in the country, look at how the government officials are always trying to justify growth. Look how investors are exiting the Republic of Kenya. Those are some of the things which we should really look at, especially at this particular moment. We have seen how the nation is doing, and many commentators say that it's doing really bad, especially when it comes to debt management and theft of public resources. There's a very big odious debt according to Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi, which is really not known where it was spent, because in the Republic of Kenya, the laws and the constitutional allows that this borrowing must be spent on development and it must be approved with parliament. However, we have never seen any loan being approved by parliament. It's just passed through some loopholes. So Mr. Jimmy Wanjigi gave examples of what is happening in West Africa, Ghana, Greece, Lebanon, and says that Kenya may follow suit. And if this debt distress comes to Kenya, first of all, we are going to suffer, especially from salaries and many other things, and we are going to lose our sovereignty. Our farmers are not going to benefit, yet we are an economy which relies 80% on agriculture.